All right. So we're well, first of all, thank you to my opponent here for joining me in this debate. We're going to be debating public education, or I guess, be it resolved, education is too important to be left to the state. I'm going to be taking the affirmative, basically arguing that the public education system should be abolished and instead we should have a free market in education. So, why should we abolish public education? My argument is the same against any government monopoly. The free market provides superior results to a government monopoly. Anytime that you have a monopoly, there's no competition. You get an increasingly inferior product. In this case, the education of students at an increasingly higher cost. And if you look at the cost of public education in the United States in the last 30 years, in real terms, there's been about a 50% increase from $12,000 per student per year to 18,000. This is in real terms, so inflation adjusted dollars. I think that was $21. So the cost has been going up per student, and I would argue that the results are pretty bad. That a lot of students who are graduating today have only functional literacy. So it's not delivering very much for the cost. I guess it's a pretty decent introduction. So I'll uh, hand the floor over to my opponent.
Okay, so the US for let's say public spending is always inefficient. Like if we look at the rest of the world, we can take a bad example, Italy. Italy has not very good or very efficient schooling system, but it's still way better than the US, and it's mostly public, and it's not a monopoly. People can always come and build schools. The private ones mostly cost more and are less efficient than the public ones. So I wouldn't understand, like, when you say every time the state has a monopoly, it's going bad. That is just, in this reality, false. Like, every country in Europe has better education than the US, and most of them have monopoly on education from the state.
So are you saying Italy has a monopoly or doesn't have a monopoly? Because you're saying most of Europe does have a monopoly. Are you including Italy in that? You said earlier they don't have a monopoly.
Depending on the definition of monopoly, because
Okay.
if for monopoly we are talking, can only one company, or the state in this case, produce the product? The answer is no, but this is not the definition of monopoly. The definition of monopoly is more like, is it the most, let's say, a monopoly? Just that if you think about buying something, education, in example, you think of one company, in this case, the state. This would be my definition of a monopoly. It's much more realistic than literally it has to be the only buyer that you can buy from. That's basically never existed.
Seller, yeah. Well, in Canada and the US at any rate, the public school system has about a 90% market share. That is, of all the students that are being educated at the primary and secondary level, about 90% of them are educated by the public school system. So I do think that it's fair to call it a monopoly simply based on, that market share. Maybe they don't have 100%, and you're right. Public schools, private schools are a thing. People homeschool, that's another alternative. But because the cost is free to the end user, they're going to have a dominant position in the marketplace. Just like if everybody received a free Toyota from the government, most people would just drive that, right? They wouldn't, some people would still buy a Ferrari or whatever if you're stupid rich, but most people are just going to say, okay, this is good enough, even if it wasn't the car I wanted. The government's giving it to me. I'm going to drive it. I'm not, I can't. I wouldn't spend my money on a different car. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what is like in places where education is like education has always been since like 200 years ago, maybe a bit less, but you get the idea. Always one of the thing we use taxes for, like that is pretty much established, that if we are gonna have people vote and be citizens all equals to another, we have to have a basic understanding of reality. Like we cannot have people going around, for example, thinking that the earth is flat, or at least we have to try to combat that. And public education seems to be the best way to do it. I don't know what will be your system.
I agree that education is important, but this whole line of thought is begging the question, whether public education is the best way to educate people or not. You're sort of making the assumption that they are. However, if a private system is better, then that undermines that whole argument.
Yeah, sure. Because for what we can see, it is not.
But for the most majority of goods, I think most people would accept that markets are superior to the government. You wouldn't have the government producing cars.
Oh no, oh no. Medicine, for example, medicine, nobody wants private. No fucking body.
Well, not nobody. The Swiss
If
have a
the
private
if
system
the
that
government,
works very well.
yeah, there is a private system for the very rich, and that shouldn't exist. But
Yeah, in
for
Switzerland,
the everyday citizen,
in, in Switzerland, the whole system is private for everybody. There's subsidies for low income people, but there's no government ran healthcare.
yeah, and are the outcomes good?
They're some of the best in the world. They do spend a lot of money. It's a very rich country. Um, now,
So basically, what happens here is they don't subsidize it, or they subsidize it.
they do have subsidies. Basically, it's everybody has private insurance, but they have subsidies for low income people so that they can still participate in the market economy. Basically,
Okay, so are the outcomes good for everybody, or is it
yeah. As far as I
like
know,
what
the
are we
Swiss
talking
outcomes
about?
are some of the best in the world, like in terms of results. And I mean, people from around the world go to Switzerland for medical care. They have a very good system, but it's also very expensive. They pay a lot into it, but they're also like a very rich, a very old country, so they
It's,
choose.
yes, for what I understand of Switzerland is that there's a very high number of people that have a lot of money, and people come all around the world for basically living in a place that has no taxes or very, very few taxes. And the thing is, Switzerland, for like at least 30 or 40 years, has done the opposite of privatization. So Switzerland has been trying to keep the wealth that is coming from all these riches, all these rich people. So it seems like if they had such a good system, it would be strange for them to do the opposite, to now try to do the other thing.
I'm not sure. So you're saying they're engaged in nationalization, which would be the opposite of privatization.
They are up in their taxes. Yeah, in general, yes.
Well, just
They are
because.
moving away from that system.
Right, but that doesn't mean it's better. It just that just means they're doing it, right? They could be making a mistake.
Yeah, but if the people in a system are voting for people to govern a system that works, that completely works, it will be strange for the people to do the opposite of that system. Like there seems to be a problem here. If there wasn't a problem, they wouldn't do anything about it, right?
Right, but I mean, Donald Trump got elected. You're not saying that that was like the right course of action for America, right? I mean, people can do things that aren't necessarily in their best interest.
Yeah, the approval of Donald Trump is basically is a strongman. So the approval for Donald Trump has always been around 30% of the population, which is good for a democratic president. That is not bad at all. The thing is, if you look at the policies of the, let's say, of the singular policies of Donald Trump, they vary a lot. For example, even the most, let's say, popular at the time, the wall, we don't talk about it anymore. Everybody hates it now. And a lot of like his policies are not very, like when he talks about economy, he doesn't talk about economy at all. And when he talks about anything really, people don't like it mostly. The people that vote him for who he is, not for what he does.
Yeah, I agree that that modern voters aren't, for the most part, very issue driven. But I think we're sort of getting into the weeds here. So I want to return to public education, which is the topic of our debate.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so here's my argument against public education is that you have a very monolithic, centralized system, and there's no way really for it to improve or change. It's very static. And so a better system is one that's decentralized, that can adapt and change and evolve. And that's what you would get with a market economy.
No, it is not gonna. You're right that it is gonna adapt, but adapt to what? Is it gonna adapt to make the quality of the education better, or maybe the cost lower? No, most of the economy, when the economy adapts, is not to get a better product. It is to get a better. Uh, Mostly, it is to get a better profit. And in a, let's say, in a market which is education, basically you're getting money out of people. That is the thing about it. So you're inclined to make money to pay teacher less, get have the requirement to have teacher lower to get more teacher or to pay them less. There's a lot of things that you can do to earn more money in this business that does not equal a good outcome for the education, exactly like healthcare.
Ultimately, the way that entrepreneurs obtain profit is by doing a better job of forecasting consumer demand than their competition. So, absolutely, schools could compete by producing a higher quality of education or targeting their education to a particular segment of the population. Different students have different educational needs, which aren't necessarily being met by a one size fits all educational model. So some people are more tactile learners.
Yeah, then let's have a much better educational plan in the public sector. No,
The thing
it's much
is,
easier than
but
it's
is
much
it?
easier than if you want to do something. We have the money to do it. It's much easier to vote in a government than hope for some rich people to fix it.
But
You're basically saying, okay, we can fix it, but I think it's better if we just roll a dice and hope for the good outcome.
I mean, you could say, okay, let's fix the public system, but we've had that option the whole time, and it's never happened. The public system is basically unchanged since it was introduced in Bismarck's Germany. The whole intent of the public system isn't really to educate students; it's to promote conformity and obedience and produce worker and soldier drones for the state.
And you're completely right about that. And the only way to fix it is not to roll a dice, it's to get in a government that wants to do that and make them do it. Like in France. In France, if the government doesn't do shit, we burn shit. They burn shit. Cities entirely until the government does the shit they were elected to do. That's the best way, the most efficient way.
I believe the most efficient way is to have market competition, because then schools have to be responsive to parents. If a school's not doing a good job, the parents will pull their children out, they'll go with a different school. Whereas under the public system, you've got such a huge bureaucracy, parents can't even choose where they're sending their students for the most part. They got to be within the district. And you have uh, public sector unions that protect bad teachers. Everything's based on seniority
Okay, no,
and
no.
not ability.
Okay, let's go to one argument at a time. Schools are geolocked by nature because we are living in reality. People cannot drive more than 1 hour to get their kids to school, and there's only a needed number of schools in an area. We don't need 3 schools if there can be only one, because all those schools are gonna keep competing for no reason. So one school is gonna have all the kids, and 2 schools are gonna be empty for no reason. Like, this is a waste. It is wasteful, completely wasteful.
But it's not for no reason.
It is much
They're
easier.
competing in order to ensure the highest quality at the lowest cost. That's something you don't get.
Yeah, okay. The thing about competition is that after the competition is done, there is another monopoly. For example, let's say that there were 3 schools at the start of the competition. 3 schools. There needs to be only one, because it makes sense to be only one in that area. So they compete. One wins. Well, now it's the monopoly. There doesn't need to be another one. And now that school is the basically only school in that area. It has the money to have publicity and everything. Everyone knows that that is the only school and that is the best school, even if the product gets worse or the teachers are paid less. Even if the outcome changes, now there's only one school in town. So yes, that's competition for you.
But your worst case scenario is what you're proposing. You're saying, let's have a government monopoly because we're worried a monopoly in the private sector might result. The reality is that usually you don't even get a monopoly. I mean, most towns, you have all sorts of different
Usually.
Okay.
Look at the US economy and you say that, well, it's not usual to have a monopoly. What are you saying, man? It is extremely usual to have a monopoly.
I disagree. Where are you? How are you basing that on?
There's basically 3 social media companies that basically no longer compete. There is when there is competition, it is wasteful. For example, in the streaming market, there is only a certain amount of content, and they all compete to do nothing. For example, Netflix was much more efficient before the competition started than it is now. For what reason? There's no reason for there to be 10 streaming companies. There can only be one. Like, what is the reason for? What is the competition doing there?
But there's more than one. There's Twitch, there's YouTube, there's Kick. Like you said, with the
Those
social
things
media,
do things very differently.
You've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got. I mean, there's multiple. So these are all examples of markets that don't have monopoly.
Okay. Give me. I can give you a perfect. Give me a social media that makes their product to be, let's say, short messages, not videos, just short messages. Think of
Twitter?
3 of them. Yeah, Twitter. Then
It's the only one that I know of.
I think I made my point.
But Twitter is still competing with Facebook and other social
Yeah, but
media
Facebook
companies.
does things differently.
But it's still social
Yeah,
media. I mean, they're
those
not doing the
no
exact
no
same manner, but they're
those
still doing the same thing. It's still mindless engagement for
no
you.
no no completely different thing. For example, YouTube, it's a video. Twitch, it's live. Now YouTube is competing against Twitch for lives, but YouTube is already a monopoly for videos. Like these big companies may be competing, but they're competing for other things in which they are not the monopoly.
I mean,
Like
Twitter
they're
competes
not
with
already a
Reddit
monopoly.
for discussion as well.
Yeah, but like for Twitter, Google, there's literally a new term to mean to search something up. You can say Google something. You can say I tweeted something. It's such a monopoly that everybody understands what you're saying.
Google actually is an example of a monopoly, but they're an example of a monopoly, but it's not a bad thing. They're a monopoly. They're a monopoly because they're so much better than their competition. So yes, they
Are
became.
they one? If we understand, like one, Google. If you look at what Google has done in the last when it became a monopoly, you can see a lot of shit, like really shitty things that Google has done throughout the years.
Like what?
And well, if the argument is okay, let's not have the state to be a monopoly, to have this monopoly that does very shitty things, like what is the argument here? Like if we have a very clear example of market that became a monopoly, and the only thing that can stop the market from being a monopoly is the state, then shouldn't we just have a state that is competing from within? Like if you want to have a competition, can't we just ensure the competition?
I don't think. I don't think Google's done anything wrong. I mean, they provide a lot of free services.
Okay, so for example, before they completely went ballistic on the ads now, you can get a search on Google and get things that you didn't search for, but Google were paid to show you. For example, which is not very good for a search engine. You should search, you should be seeing what you were typing for, not what they were paid to show you.
But
Like
Google
for
still does a
example,
better job
or
of that than any other search engine of providing you with the results that you're looking for.
okay, then let's. You see, in the market, the thing that is monopolizing the market is always the best one, not because it gives the best service possible, but because even if somebody came up with a better idea, they don't have the funds, they don't have anything to compete against Google. The best option is Google buys it and they get the idea. But sometimes that doesn't even happen because sometimes, well, one, the idea could be not profit oriented. For example, the idea of showing what is the best search goes against the profit that you can make if you can just search for things and get paid for showing the things that you were not searching for. That's something. Like that is something that doesn't, like that, for example, the state would never do. There is no reason for the state to make something that is not useful or helpful, goes against everything that the app is supposed to do just for money. That doesn't exist in a public founded monopoly, or
I'm not so sure about that.
whatever you want to call it.
But
Also, why would
why would the government do
the
something
state?
that's not good, but it makes them money? I mean, why did they go to war, right? Why did the United States attack
No.
Iraq?
Okay,
Because it
okay.
benefits
This
military
is stupid.
contractors, but it
Okay,
hurts the
this is
public.
stupid. No, gamble, no future, please. In a public school in America, it was completely different than every other public system because you guys are obsessed with competition. In Italy and
I'm not
basically in
American.
every European country, the school is owned by the state, and the state pays the workers a fixed amount. There is no like to do the job. Like you don't get paid more if you make more money for the school, because the more money you make from the school, well, you are taking them from the people. There is no way of, let's say, especially in healthcare, if you charge more, you're taking the money from the citizen. So for the state, it doesn't matter because the state just takes the money anyway. The state already has taxes, so why would he use them? Like the state is not owned by any citizen or by any government, so making more money for the state, taking them from the citizen that already pay taxes, it doesn't make sense. Nobody, like, when you talk about war, this is something else because the state loses money to make a lot of rich people richer. That is clear. That is easy. It is easy to understand. But why would a public healthcare provider want to get more money out of their payers when how much they get paid does not equal how much they make?
But the same sort
You
of
know,
graft that
like
occurs with war can occur with any government spending, right? You've got patronage.
no. Again, if you're a doctor and you get paid a certain amount for whatever, it doesn't make sense for example, that doctor to prescribe you a medication that costs more because he doesn't get anything out of it.
Well,
At least
does he get paid per procedure?
no, a
Because
doctor gets paid for hours. That's how it works.
so the way it works in Canada, which does have universal health care as well, is basically the government pays it's socialized medical insurance. So the doctors are paid based on how many procedures they do, how many visits they get, that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
but I mean, I find it very hard to believe that you don't acknowledge that there's graft and patronage and people sort of taking advantage of the government and getting rich off the government in Europe and other countries. I mean, that's
It is
universal.
impossible to get rich. No, it is impossible to get rich from that in this kind of system. It's impossible. A doctor in Italy gets paid the same if whatever, like you get the hours, you get the money.
But
If you
you
don't do
don't think
stupid
there's
shit
people
that
that
makes
are like
someone killed,
you don't
you
think there's
get the
people that are
same.
close to politicians that receive special interest funding from the government? You don't think that happens?
Politician in medicine, like, do you think doctors have ties to the? No, that doesn't exist in Italy. That doesn't exist in Europe. There is only such a ties in America and Canada because there are big, incredible monopolies in the private sector. That's the only reason that this exists. In Europe, this doesn't exist.
Okay, but why do
You
people
talk to
fund
a
politicians'
European and you
campaigns? Why do they give them so much money so they can run for office? I mean, in Italy, just like anywhere else, politicians have to raise a lot of money to run for office, right?
yeah,
And
okay.
don't you think that the people giving them money expect to get paid back when they win with lucrative government contracts?
That's the best thing about having a complete monopoly of the state. There is no individual company that can get someone so much money to a politician in this sector. There are a lot of other sectors in which the private sector is very huge and that can do it, but no doctor, let's say, no singular doctor in Italy can influence from the public sector. In the private sector, it can be, but in the public sector, nobody can do it. Nobody has enough money or any reason to do it because it's public, because they don't get anything from getting more money from the patients.
All right.
And if they want to get a raise, they need to get a raise for everybody, not only for themselves. They need to get a raise for everybody, and that is just good. Like people being close to politicians to get better wages is the normal thing instead of having one company trying to get privileges just for them.
all right.
That's the good thing.
Well, thank you so much for participating in the debate. Do you have any final words before we go?
I said enough.
All right. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.